And what they're putting is there are two things that are going on in this quote. The first thing is that they put a star over the tough kuf, etc., that spell out all the years that add up together to the year of when the synagogue was created. But also, they chose this one because if you take the avo, aleph bet, vav aleph, and then the bet from Beitecha, it spells out avoav. Okay? So the name of the rabbi at the time when he did the building campaign, it was the first major building campaign in Amsterdam history. In Dutch, not the first, but the first Sephardic. What happened was they had three separate ones, and then three separate communities, Sephardic, until 1639, when they took a big warehouse on the Houtgracht and carved it out to make it. They expanded it to make it bigger, and then the Ashkenazim across built the great synagogue. They were called the Groot, or how do you pronounce it? Groot. All the Dutch people are not here. Synagogue, and so then it was, of course, intolerable that lowly Ashkenazim should have such a nice synagogue. The Sephardic synagogue should not be as nice. And so, of course, they had to build one which was even nicer and fancier. And that's why you have what you have here. Okay? How are you? Good to see you. Good to see you again. So just a few things to note, okay? Along the side, not these big ones, but along the side are 12 pillars, parallel to 12 Shvatim. And we have that in the Portuguese synagogue in Beavis Marks as well as in New York. They're all built along the same exact dimensions. Similarly, they have the 2/3 of the synagogue till the Teva. That's not called an Aron, it's called a Heichal. And then the Teva on the back. And then I'll explain more, but the guard is getting nervous, so let's walk out to the anything that the Ashkenazim created across the street. And just to give you basically, so in contrast to general questions, the question that everybody asks when they come in is, where was Spinoza excommunicated? The answer is he was not excommunicated in the synagogue. It took place some years before this was created in 1675. The land for the new building was acquired on December 12, 1670. On April 7th of the following year, Moses Curiel, Joseph Israel Nunez, Emmanuel de Pinto, and David de Pinto, son of Isaac Pinto, who lived on Rembrandt's block, took turns laying the 4 cornerstones they had purchased as major donors to the project. So they were special donors. This is really the first building campaign. The cost of the synagogue was 186,000 guilders. Major gifts and loans came from both Jewish and Gentile sources. It also required a large measure of goodwill from the Dutch. The architect was a non-Jew by the name of Elias Baumann. Elias Baumann was experienced in large public projects, and he also had strong business and personal connections with the Jewish community. Baumann was also present at the wedding of Moses Israel and served as the arbitrator of a dispute between Yaakov Avoav Azorio and Joshua Abenda. And perhaps most of all, and how many Dutch architects could claim this, according to Nadler's book, he was familiar with the construction of synagogues. He had served as the builder working under architect Stalpaert for the Ashkenazic shul. 5 years, they never called this a shul, by the way. That's not a word that's fine. Okay, 5 years after, this is the Esnoga. And 5 years after finishing this Esnoga, the man who created this building, Elias Baumann, became the official city architect of Amsterdam. The original completion date was slated for 1672. In April of that year, disaster struck the Netherlands, and they were invaded by the French king, Louis XIV. And so the Dutch only gained the upper hand in this battle in 1674, and it was created in 1670. It was finished in the summer of 1675. And then he writes the following: the compound dwarfed the Ashkenazic synagogue across the street. That was, of course, the point. The sanctuary's red brick exterior rises imposingly from a row of short outbuildings surrounding it. Virtually free of ornamentation except for a balustrade that encloses the roof and a few pilasters between the tall arched windows, the building emerges from the outside. The building from the outside makes its impression through mass rather than artistry. Much taller than anything else in the neighborhood. It did not take long for Esnoga to become a familiar feature of the city's skyline. And to the same artist, you can look this up, that we saw did the Jewish cemetery, Jacob van Ruysdael. He also did a cityscape painting called A View of Amsterdam from the Amstel, and one of the most prominent things on there is the synagogue. And of course, that was unthinkable anywhere else in Europe, that you could have a city that one of the most prominent landmarks would be a synagogue. And so what you have here is the following. On each side of the nave are 2 Ionic pillars, and a row of 6 additional smaller columns hold up each women's balcony. There's enough seating between the 2 levels for 1,200 men and 440 women. Okay, that's less, in case you're wondering. Okay? There is standing room for visitors in the entrance gallery. And why is that? Because if you look at your handout, you will see non-Jews would come and stand all the time. And you see in the picture, they even bring their dogs in with them. Whether that's there because all Dutch paintings have dogs, or whether it's there because that was created. Why did they block off this back? Because, as I mentioned, one of the popular things to do in Amsterdam for non-Jews, again, this is the only place in the world at the time where Jews were not living in a ghetto. So you can come see a living, vibrant Judaism. So this is how you would do it. Just to give you a sense of what Judaism was like in the synagogue when it was flourishing. So we have these remarkable drawings from a non-Jewish French artist by the name of Bernard Picart. So just to give you a few cents, this is taken of this synagogue, okay? Taken of this synagogue 300-400 years ago. So if you open up the first page on the top, what holiday is that?
Sukkot.
That's Sukkot, that's Hoshana Rabbah. What Sephardim do, we do this to this day, is they bring all the Torahs up to the synagogue, and then up to the Teiba, I'm sorry, and then at each Hakafa, they blow the shofar, and then they bring one of the Torahs back. Interestingly, you'll see, as you may have noticed, I was wearing my talit. They do not wear the talis the way down their backs, the way they wear them. Their understanding of atifa, the bracha is lihit atef batzitzit, is to wrap it around your body. Interestingly here, unlike what you saw when you came on Shabbat, they wore the talit over their heads. Why did that change? My theory lies not in halacha, but in haberdashery. And that is their original hats. Again, nobody wore yarmulkes. You see, there was no such thing as a yarmulke. They did not wear yarmulkes. They walked outside and they walked inside wearing hats. And the only difference was that in contrast to a church where non-Jews remove their hats, Gentiles, when they come into their sanctuary, they're shocked by the fact that they're doing something so uncouth as wearing their hats. So they're wearing their hats. Now, original hats were tricorns. Those you can put a tallis over. When they switched over to top hats, as they wear here today, it's very hard to put a tallis over your top hat. That's why I think it changed. That's it. Because originally all they wore was talitot. Just to show you an interesting thing about what wealth meant in those communities and what it was like to be part of society, if you look at another picture by Picart, what holiday is this on the bottom? That's Pesach. Who's the person at the Seder in the foreground, at the front of the painting?
Afikomen finder?
That's a slave. Okay?
Sleeping?
That's an Evet Kanani. Okay? If you look through, again, remember, Jewish law has Evet Kanani, right? And that was a basic part of the Evet Kanani is kind of Jewish, and the basic part of they could
Free him?
they could free them and then they become automatically Jewish. There was if you study, and I gave a speech about this in S&P on Shavuot. Were you there, Morty? It's called When Jews Own Slaves. And just like in Ashkenazic halacha, they'll have questions about chickens and other things like that. Sephardim, who lived in the Ottoman Empire or originally in the Netherlands before slavery was banned, they had slaves, and they were slaves. You know, basically they were kind of Jewish, kind of not, and there was nothing racial about it. People would own slaves from different areas, and people would free their slaves, and then they would become Jewish, and they would marry. So what you have is just this odd, interesting thing of a slave who's also kind of Jewish, so that slave is chayav to have a Seder, celebrating freedom from slavery. Okay? So it's a very odd, and it just shows you what it was like. And then there are all sorts of tshuvot, you see, that the Dutch went to the colonies, to the Caribbean, where they still had slavery, and then they banned slavery in the Netherlands, so that when they moved back and forth, you see in tshuvot, they had to leave their slaves in the Caribbean, because if they came here, then they would be free. This is not to celebrate slavery morally at all. It's just to show you that they were fully a part of society, just as the Sephardim in the Ottoman Empire, where slavery was a part of their life. That's what I was saying. If you look here, the next page, here you, what? Well, they're not eating at the moment. They're doing the Haggadah. They're not eating matzah at the moment. They're looking at the Haggadah, if you see. They're reading the Haggadah. So you only lead for it. So if you look at it's the exact same synagogue. If you take a look, you see it's the exact same balcony, the exact same cages, Ezra Nashim for women, and the exact same chandeliers, right? It's literally, you're standing in something that's virtual. There's no electricity to this day in this synagogue. You can imagine what it's like coming in here on Yom Kippur evening when all the candles in the synagogue are lit.
You
It
gotta
is
never burn down.
incredible. It is incredible. The holes in here for candles so people can read. Right.
Oh
People
my
are sitting
God.
candles next
Can
to
you
the
imagine?
Okay.
Real
If
fire
you take a
hazard.
look, this is just to give you another interesting thing. And then we have to go back out to the scary woman. What you see here is Rosh Hashanah here. Again, you see the Atifah. But what mitzvah are they doing? Shofar. Okay? So first, if you look at the blow-up picture of the guy, they blow shofar differently. It's not shofar out of the side of their mouth and the same sounds as you do. Tkiya is the same, but the trua is entirely different. It's a trua like a Yemenite trua. They, so they put it up to the brunt of their mouth, and they're not using their tongue to go. So actually, it's an entirely very, very different type of sound, and they do that at S&P in Rosh Hashanah to this day in New
And
York.
that's kosher?